Protesters interrupted a House committee hearing yesterday as lawmakers debated cuts to Medicaid. The issue is increasingly seen as politically toxic for Republicans, as GOP senators like Josh Hawley point out that Trump voters would be hurt by those cuts. Politico magazine reports that concern is starting to matter to President Trump as he begins to consider what investigations the Democrats would launch if they retake the House in 2026. Quote, "He knows what happens if we lose the House," said one advisor. Joining us now, the Washington Post congressional economics correspondent Jacob Bogage and Ashley Parker, who's still with us. So, Jacob, what is so far in this bill?
A lot. They don't call it the big, beautiful bill for nothing. We're talking about trillions of dollars of tax cuts. A lot of that extends current policy. And to pay for that, because it's very expensive, we're looking at cuts to social safety net programs. That's Medicaid, that's SNAP, or the program we used to call food stamps. You're not going to see in the bill language that says, X amount of dollars less means XYZ number of people need to be off these programs. But what Republicans are doing is they're saying to states, you're not going to get as much money to implement these programs. If you want to continue these benefits, you come up with the money, or dismiss people and cut them off the rolls. So it's money, going from one place, cutting from one place to fund these tax cuts.
How much does it matter that you have Republican senators like Josh Hawley writing op-eds in the New York Times, doing interviews with cable news, saying doing this is politically suicidal for us, cutting Medicaid, hurting the voters, the very voters that put Donald Trump into office, and by extension, the rest of them, is going to mean that the Democrats retake the House, maybe even have a chance at the Senate?
It matters a lot. And I think Democrats, I talk to them frequently, they're bullish on their chances of retaking the House. And there is some bubbling optimism about their chances in the Senate, maybe not to retake it, but to really compete in states like Maine and North Carolina, where, those would be key to establishing a majority. It also matters that it's coming from the Senate. There are a lot of folks in the House that's drafting the bill right now that are looking across the hallway to the other side of the Capitol and saying, why would I vote for a politically toxic issue like cutting Medicaid, cutting food benefits, if I know in the Senate they're just going to rip it up? That's going to be used against me in my campaign. And that's the tension we're seeing right now.
So they also want to add work requirements. What's the language around that, Jacob?
Yeah, they're based off work requirements already in place for SNAP, and it's 80 hours a week of work, looking for work, volunteer work, educational activity. To a lot of people, that sounds really manageable. To other folks who are struggling to find work, or struggling to make ends meet, or may have to care for family members, or it's difficult. What Republicans would say is Bill Clinton supported work requirements on welfare reform in the 90s. This is what we're doing today to shore up these programs, and they would hope it'd be bipartisan. It, of course, is not.
Ashley, you just spent some time in the White House. You had an interview with the president in the Oval Office. Could you gauge how sensitive he and his team are to what could happen in 2026 if they lose the House?
So in reporting that story, not just talking to the president twice, but to talking to a ton of senior people around him, they are incredibly sensitive to a couple of those things. They have described it as him having a countdown clock, not to the end of his term, but to the midterms. As someone described it, he understands that at some point the music stops, and that's potentially the midterms. So there's that element. He himself is so sensitive to not cutting any of these social safety nets, particularly Social Security. But really, for him, he understands this is very much a red line. That's why it was such a big deal and such a political headache when Elon Musk went on Joe Rogan's show and sort of off the cuff described Social Security as the biggest biggest Ponzi scheme that exists, and then some other smaller things that are in this bill, and why some of these cuts that Jacob was just talking about are being made. They're also laser-like focused on delivering on some of his economic promises, not just the big tax cut he's trying to keep from his first term, but things like no taxes on tips and no taxes on overtime. I cannot tell you the number of times I heard from people around him that this was something he promised, and his belief is, and their belief is, that if he does not deliver on these sorts of things, that Republicans will not come out, especially when he's not on the ballot, and support Republicans in the midterm elections.
So what's he doing about that? I mean, he's talked about how he's been on the phone with Speaker Mike Johnson. Has he been talking to Republicans on the Senate side of things who are expressing real doubts about this bill? Has he been talking to any of the moderates in the House who are also expressing real doubts about this bill, the ones in frontline districts like in New York or California? What do we know about his involvement there?
Well, again, I want to go back to briefly a question you asked, Jacob, which is how much does it matter that people like Josh Hawley on the Senate side, are writing these op-eds and warning about this? And it does matter, but also with no disrespect to Senator Hawley, what matters more and what Trump understands, and again, this is why this has all sort of been a red line for him, even without talking to some of these members, is he understands that it matters to his voters. So it may sound potentially okay. If you'll indulge me, I went on a road trip for work in 2014 before Trump was a name, but I talked to a number of voters who ended up essentially being MAGA voters. And what they said was they were very against government entitlements for their neighbors who they believed were taking advantage of the government. And so that's why you see that some Republicans would want to increase the work requirements or make cuts to Medicaid. But all these people I talked to were getting these benefits themselves and relied on them and thought they were absolutely crucial. And that's what Trump understands he will run up against.
I appreciate that you can remember detailed reporting from 2014, 11 years ago. Ashley Parker, thank you very much.